It's time to set the record straight. I've had a whole lot of, again, Canadians without a clue, without any understanding of anything of their own country, their own industries, and world international binding law. Folks, my name is Dave Bjorkman. I work in nuclear here in Canada, in a country that signed a non-proliferation treaty with the allies of World War II. I'm not the only country, the only Canadian or otherworldly citizen, subject, peasant, serf, whatever title they have in their respective countries that signed this binding law. It came in the 70s, and it was in response to countries like Israel, India, Pakistan, Japan, who witnessed the proliferation of Russia and USA going astronomical. Where did Russia and USA get all of this uranium and were able to enrich it? Well, for Russia, folks, the former Soviet Union, that came from Kazakhstan, whose grades are 80 to 100 times better than everybody else in the world. This makes the mining and processing portion, which can be deep, like I'm showing you Saskatchewan's mines, 1,600 feet below the ground, that yields 100 to 150 times the grade of every other country in the world, far outpacing Kazakhstan. That's a fact. That grade uranium, Canada signed in the 1970s non-proliferation, meaning we can enrich our uranium. That's right. I've never said Canada enriches uranium. I said Canada's source of the most highest enriched uranium in the world. And it is. It is. Between 25 and 27% of all energy consumption in nuclear by the USA comes from Canada's ore from Saskatchewan. Comes out of the ground in its block, whatever you want to call it, its raw ore at 20% uranium. It is a 1 in a trillion from an old solar system, old early time of our universe, early stages, where suns were much, much bigger than they are now in the universe. Huge, in fact, didn't last long. A piece of one of those flying through space hit the world. A big chunk of it hit Saskatchewan and into Alberta, most of which in the impact and the fallout of that was in Saskatchewan. Early on in Earth's history, it sat there. Its shelf life deteriorates over millions of years. This stuff was so potent and so dense, it makes up 20% of the ore harvested, making it extremely inexpensive for proliferation countries. Today, those are the allies of World War III. And for Canada, largely since the 50s, that only ally we've majority supplied has been the United States of America. Most of their warheads, most of their nuclear submarines, nuclear weapons, they're not quite at the hypersonic level yet that Russia is, but they're getting there. But they're more than mock, I'll just say that. Nuclear weapons, big ICBMs, are almost all entirely from Saskatchewan's ore, because it's a lot easier to process that ore that comes much cheaper into enriched uranium. In fact, because Canada can't and is not allowed, forbidden in international law, only the 5 allies. So I'm sorry, Canadians, you don't understand this. I know you don't get it. For all those hammering my feeds, calling me a liar, calling me all these things, Mark Carney did not bring Scott Moe for agriculture to China at Davos. He brought him for nuclear. because resources belong to the provinces. If it was such an issue, agriculture, if that was the number one issue, I can certainly promise you it would have been Danielle Smith, Doug Ford, and David Eby there along with Saskatchewan on agriculture. It was because there's one thing Scott Moe needs to sign over for China, and that's uranium. Our highest grade, 20%, again, 100 to 150 times more potent and more raw, cleaner than any other source you can find in the world outside of Kazakhstan that is tied up with Russia. Kazakhstan is Russia's supply and value chain. It's why the former Soviet Union was able to make more nuclear weapons than the United States. I've talked about this to plenty. I don't expect lots of people to understand it. Canada relies on USA just to bring that ore to 3 to 5% to run their CANDUs and make their medical grade isotopes out of that uranium after USA slightly enriches it. Again, the best source, cleanest, most viable source in the entire world, bar nobody else. That's Saskatchewan. It is easier and much, much cheaper for any country with access to that ore who begins enrichment to use that ore, not only for enriched reactors, because you get much more power, like United States, Russia, China, France, UK, who are the only ones allowed. Anyone from earlier on, like Israel, Japan, Pakistan, India, who built nuclear facilities in those time periods, can keep those going, can't build anymore. And they certainly can't build bombs. Who can build bombs? Who is unrestricted? USA, China, Russia, UK, and France. So when Canada says it's going to supply its most best source of ore worldwide to China, there are no restrictions for China to make as many nuclear bombs, missiles, and any military equipment in nuclear that they want to. Zero restrictions. Anyone saying they're not going to do that is a fool. You're a fool. Now, Canada has traded those mines. One I got up here. Well, I had up the screens down now. If I'd played it, you would have saw. But they've got several mines that do supply certain quantities to China. They've been doing that since the China-Canada FIPA deal. Yes, many comments on that one viral comment post are correct. I never said conservatives didn't start this. I never said that. In fact, if you take the time to look at all my posts and educations, you'll find I absolutely start with China-Canada FIPA deal. Stephen Harper, whose Governor General Communist appointed by him was Mark Carney, who clearly published all of this in 2011 on the Governor of the Bank of Canada website. I can pull all that up. I can pull up the Government of Canada website on our superior ore that drastically cheapens the enrichment process for any proliferation country by leaps and bounds. Any naive dummy. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to say dummy, and I don't want to do this. I'm trying to be better and not name call, so I'm just going to take a second to correct myself and not get upset. Canada has the world's greatest source of uranium in the hands of any of the 5 allies. That most certainly, definitely leads to nuclear weapons. You would be very, very hard-pressed to convince the President of the United States or any military serving American that that wouldn't happen with Canada's 100 to 150 times greatest source of uranium, cleanest, best source, cheapest source. It allows them to get into weapons grade uranium much, much easier and much, much cheaper. There again, everybody, all you have to do is pick up your Google, look at which countries in the world are allowed to proliferate. And when Canada, Mark Carney, sits down with China at Davos and pens resources and mining rights and has only one premier, Scott Moe, there to sign off those resource rights, that's for nuclear enablement. It's a transition of Canada becoming China's #1 nuclear weapons grade uranium supplier. I'm sorry, that is the truth. Otherwise, their next best source is Kazakhstan, who's also on the peace board and has strong ties to Russia. Russia hasn't given that up yet. China's still down there with the UK and France, scratching it out with the rest of the world, at least until Mark Carney and Scott Moe penned a deal that's to be ratified between the end of February and early March, where Donald J. Trump and now the entire Trump administration and military complex say, if Canada, you do this, you sign this deal with China, you are going to get 100% tariffs. That means you have lost USMCA, snap of a finger, over security and national security of the United States of America. And you're basically going to be, for all intents and purposes, at the maximum of sanctions and trade embargoes, where the next military operation is the USA with aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines at BC's ports and Atlantic Canada's New Brunswick ports to make sure nothing comes and goes out of Canada. And worse will be the F-35s monitoring your air travel and seeing what you're sending to China overhead. I'm sorry, but this video is real, credible, undeniable, verifiable. People, I've told you, there are no shortcuts. Grabbing AI and saying, does Canada send enriched uranium to China? No, Canada can't enrich uranium. They have the world's greatest source, highest concentrate, easiest harvestable, cheapest harvestable to enrich. They've taken away a tremendous amount of the expense that all these other countries have to incur. You think Iran had an easy road to their limited enrichment capacity? No. Look at UK, France, and China. USA had Saskatchewan since the 50s. Russia had Kazakhstan since the 50s. Welcome to the Cold War. I'm sorry, folks. Anybody outside of those two countries, you are investing massive, massive amounts into mining just to get that raw product, going through much, much rock at explosive depths all over the world just to make a nuclear grenade. Okay? That's not the truth of Kazakhstan and Saskatchewan. Much, much cheaper at an extremely cheap rate. Again, 80 to 100 times cheaper than anywhere else in the world. For Canada, between 100 and 150 times cheaper. You want to know why Russia and USA punch beyond their weight? It's called value and supply chains. That they will never let go for their international peace and security and their national security. You're barking up the wrong tree. Mark Carney and Scott Moe have unofficially launched a proxy World War III that will be finite by the end of February, early March, if Mr. Mark Carney and Scott Moe in the New World Order continue on with China. I'd be worried about your travel, all of it at that point. You got to watch your ass in the U.S. because if Mark Carney pens all that in after Scott Moe released it, it's game over. And again, it's very naive for anyone to say, trying to support Mark Carney and Scott Moe,